Welcome to the Tracing Layer series. This is a 4-section series about the tracing layer system. And in this particular section, we are going to do this ornamental lamp. And we will do it about 99% of total tracing. And then just at the very end, we'll maybe just use a pure color of our choice here and there just to give it some snap. Just to be able to review how to turn off an influence layer and use the color we choose. The photograph we're going to be working with is right here, and that is the lamp guide. And I named it lamp guide. You will see here shortly why. But just to review, if you want to import your image, go up to here, hit File, and then Import Image, and you will come up with this box, and then just go to wherever you have your images or image on your machine. I will double click this, and what I will even do is just double click it, and then when it opens, this particular picture will open up the exact same size as the canvas. Now, because the reason why is I made it the 3600 by 2400, which is the 2.3 format of the 35mm camera I used. So it is just the exact same size as this particular picture. Now, with that in mind, all I would have to do is single click it if I was happy where it was, or I could actually manipulate it, make it larger, bigger, crop it before I set it in place. But just remember, if you start manipulating your picture too much, or if you enlarge it too much, then you may start to get artifacts that may give you color that you don't want. So in that respect, maybe review the photo selection section, and that will help you pick better photos to paint from. Because I think the better the photo, the better your painting will be. Because I am working at 300 DPI, and that's pretty tight as far as that goes. Now, what it'll do is it'll just import the picture, whatever the file name is, and this is the file name of this one. And what I will do is actually call that one just tracing layer. And what we could do is assign this to our tracing layer. Now, this is how we could do that is just by either going up and just hitting the T here, and that'll make it a tracing layer, or you can actually go up to here and go into layers and then just click on this tracing layer, and that will make it a tracing layer. Or you could also use your shortcuts. The keyboard shortcut for PC would be Alt-Shift-T, and for Mac it would be Option-Shift-T. And that will make this your tracing layer. Now, once you make this a tracing layer, then you don't really even have to have it on. Now, since it is the established tracing layer, we are going to be pulling our colors out of this particular photo, meaning this particular layer. But since it doesn't have to be on, we could turn it off. And then now it's off, but now what we're seeing is this lamp guide layer down here, which is this one right here. But we are going to do with this one is take it down to about 50. And you can make this whatever percentage you want, depending on the lightness or darkness of your photo. May make the difference there. But because it's influence also, that really doesn't matter because we're not going to be working on this layer at all. This is just our guide that we're beginning to be painting over. Now, these particular layers are the ones I'm going to be working on to start with. And what they are is just, again, the chronological order of the photo itself. So meaning that the back walls are just these walls back in here, and then this front wall right here is this front wall right through here that's kind of ahead of this back wall. So when I go to paint over these edges, I kind of want my edges to overlap what's behind them. And then the lamp itself is in front of both of those. And then just for the sake of having the stone handrail at the very foreground, what I will do is paint that last. But then also I could tone down any one of these as far as like this front wall here. When I go to paint this handrail, I can even go back to the front wall and tone that down as far as opacity goes once I start painting it. And then I will be able to see my dark handrail again and then go back in and paint it. And then I could, of course, do that the same thing with the stone handrail and turn it down with the opacity and then be able to just go back in and paint over the handrail so I could see it and then turn it back up to 100%, of course. But now what we will do now is actually go down here and we're just going to put in a new layer and call it pad. And what I'm going to do is just show you, give you a rough idea of how many different ways you could pull paint out of this particular layer here. And then this is just going to be our practice layer. Once we're done and once we show you what's going on with the brushes and pulling colors out, then we will just delete this layer. I did make this layer for a specific reason also, and that is that anytime you add a layer after you already assign the tracing layer, it's going to come up as a non-influenced layer. And that is important because then we wouldn't be pulling our colors out of our photograph anymore. We would actually having to be picking our own colors. So to make this an influence layer, you could actually even just click it right here on this button, or actually on this button up here, you could turn it off and on. And then also, of course, you could go up here into layer and click that off and on to make it an influence layer, or turn it off. And also your keyboard shortcuts, which be PC would be Alt-Shift-I, and for the Mac would be Option-Shift-I. But if I click on that again, now it's an influence layer. And now if I go back up, we could see how we could pull color out of this. And the size of the brush is kind of important only for one big reason, and that is no matter what size brush you have, you are actually only going to be pulling color out of where you touch down. So wherever I touch down, that's the color I'm going to grab. And keep in mind, my settings for my color picker are 5x5 pixels, which is the largest you can set it at. But that's still an extremely small area that I'm working right now at 3600 by 2400 at 300 dpi. So a 5x5 area is quite literally about 1/60th of an inch. So you're pulling out a very small section of where you're touching, especially if you start making much bigger brushes. So even though the brush is this big, only the very center where I'm touching down is going to grab that color. So if I go over here and grab this white, then I'm going to be painting white over everything and not using the colors that are all available within that area. So in other words, we do have to make the brush fit what we're painting. So if I go down here and paint these ornamental frameworks in that hold the glass in place, then I have to use that size of a brush. But then keep in mind, I'll zoom in even more, that if I hold this down, I'm only going to grab that color and it's going to stay that color until I let go. But now that I let go, I could still go back in and pull out new colors anywhere along that area. If there is different colors in there, it will grab it and then it will paint over what you already have. So you're never committing to any one color. You could just keep on daubing and re-grabbing, and that will be the new color you grab. And then if you want to then blend these in, then I could go straight to my blender and I will take it down in size. And what it'll do is it will blend the paints I already have down, but I won't be able to grab any new color, which that way then I could soften up some areas or diffuse some of the brush strokes if I want to, and knowing that I will not be grabbing any new colors with a blender. Now any of these tools that will lay down any type of color or value you could use to pull colors out of your photograph, but the blender has no effect whatsoever, even if it's an influence layer. And remember, for any reason, if you want to use your own colors on a non-influence layer by turning one of these buttons off, and leaving it off will be a non-influence layer, you would be on your own to pull your own colors out or to use your own colors. But to do that, if you want to use the colors that are within the photo, then just to review, all you have to do is go down here and then just say create color set from image file, and just say we want 25 colors, and then find again that same area where you kept that same photograph, and what it'll do is make you a custom palette of all the photograph colors that are within that photograph. Then this way you will have the alike colors that you may need of the variations without very little mixing involved. For that reason, you would be able to then go in and add your own colors if necessary on a non-influenced layer. Otherwise, you'll just be pulling the colors out of your tracing layer. Okay, now let's set up and get ready to paint. What I will do is actually get rid of this layer. And we are done with that. And then we can actually take it all the way back and fit it on screen. And just to briefly go over, what I will start is probably up in this corner and do all that back wall first. And then do the front wall. And then again the lamp. And I will work on it with various size brushes. And I may even introduce a couple of new layers. For example, the joints between the block. I might put a new layer above the back wall, and then that way, if I want to do the joints, it will still be behind everything else, but it will be on top of the wall. Then that way, if I want to adjust the joints here or there, or blend them in a little bit, or soften them, I'll be able to without destroying or changing or interrupting my back wall layer. Again, I try to use layers for myself to my advantage. And then what we will end up with is just the stone handrail at the very end. And I will also be actually explaining what I'm doing as I do it in the speed painting. And we also will stop here and there just for a real-time update. So let's get started on the speed painting. Okay, I'm just starting up in the upper left-hand corner, working in my lights and darks, whatever the photograph has to offer. Moving down in, I will just cover up this railing, and I will reintroduce it later on its own layer. Then that way I could turn down the layer that it's over so I can actually see where it's at. I'll just turn down the opacity, and then that way it'll reveal the railing exactly where it's at. Now, blending in the colors and destroying some of the brush strokes, I want to do that because I'd rather keep my hard edges where I want them. Right now there are many hard edges throughout all the different brush strokes, and softening them up will preserve my hard edges for just where I want them. Now, I turned down the opacity just to find that hard edge for the shadowed area of the back wall. And now just finishing in the back wall, I went ahead and turned it down again so I could see my hard edges where I want them. And then now just working in the shadow of the lamp itself. It is on its own layers too. And all I did was stagger the wall layers so I could put the sections of the shadow of the lamp on the layer that's in front of the one behind it. Then that way, again, I could turn it down and turn down the opacity, and then that way I could see where the actual lamp shadow is. Right now I'm just diffusing all the ledges in the darker areas, foreground, again, just to kill some of the brush strokes. Now I'll go ahead and just put in the handrail on its own layer, and that will be it. This way I could see where it's going to be, and you'll see it come alive when I turn the opacity back up. Just an update in real time, just to go over some of the things that might happen a little too quick in the speed painting. I went ahead and added a layer for the handrail down here, and that'll give me a couple of options. One of them is then I could go back to the back wall layer and work in behind it if I do want to touch anything up behind there, or even just like since I created different layers for these foreground walls, then I could go back in, as you might have seen while I was blending. I went back in behind them, and that gives me the option of keeping my brush strokes broken up. And then also, more importantly, it also gives me the option of going back to the back wall and then changing the opacity so I can actually see where the handrail is exactly, because that metal handrail is fairly fine, and to try and paint around it, instead of doing that, basically it's much easier just to do it the way we did it. And that way you'll be doing the photograph more precisely. Now, if you wanted to just freehand that handrail in or something along those lines, that's obviously an option also. But keeping with that method, that is also what I did with the lamp shadow itself. And what I did was I actually put the lamp shadow and started it on the actual front wall. And then that gave me the option of being able to turn down the opacity on the back wall also. And then when I do this section of the shadow, I will actually put it on the stone handrail layer, and then that way I'll be able to turn this layer down and to see where that shadow is exactly also. Because we are duplicating over the photograph, and it's just much easier to be able to see where those edges are. And then what I will actually do is the lamp, and it will have all hard edges, so hopefully it'll jump out at us nice. Now, one thing we do need to go over, and that is down here in this corner, we decided we're going to take this little light corner of the wall out of it, and it might be better off just dark in here. Now, we could do that a couple of different ways. Once we start painting this in, we could use the actual stamper tool, the clone tool, to just take those brush strokes back over this area. Or we can actually cut out a section and copy and paste it over there if you find a similar value area of colors and value. Or we can actually just turn off the influence layer of the back wall and then start using our own colors to just kind of more or less scumble that over. Because keep in mind, if we do keep it an influence layer, then you're going to have to pull all of your colors from around it and then pull them across. Because remember, as long as we hold down until we let go, we're going to keep that same color. But what we might be doing is creating a linear pattern that might be a little wee bit too obvious as far as the crosshatch I had going all over everywhere. It's going to be a different look down here in the corner. And for me personally, I would not want to pull any actual attention to just my brush strokes, because when you have big, heavy, gobby brush strokes in oils, you might actually attract attention to the brush stroke itself and not what the brush stroke is trying to represent. With that said, we're going to go back in and finish this painting up, and we will also then put in the block joints, the mortar joints, on its own layer also. That will be the very end, and that way we'll also be able to feather those in here and there and just give like a hint or a rendering of some of the joints as we go. But this will give us an option, if we put them on our own layer, that we could adjust them, change them, erase some of them, and we won't be committing into putting those in as far as on the back wall layer. They will be on their own layer. Let's go back in and get some more done. Okay, here I'm just working in the shadow itself of the lamppost, and again I put it on its own layer so I could tone down the opacity of the layers that are around it, and that way I could see the edges of the shadow itself. And some of those edges I want real nice and sharp, so I want to see exactly where I'm going. Right now I'm just doing the real ornamentation of the lamp itself, and it has a pebble finished glass on it that kind of refracts a light in a specific way. So sometimes if you know even exactly what you're doing as far as what type of object you're doing, it will help actually render the object better, knowing what the colors represent. And when I go back in and blend in some of these areas, I will leave some of the brush strokes here and there very pronounced, just to have that oil painting look. Now when I'm going with the patina, the corroded metal draining down onto the sandstone, it has a very linear pattern since it is a liquid running down. And what I will do is keep my brush strokes to that linear pattern just to help render that pattern the way it is. Now again, I'm just going to paint over that railing that I will repaint later and turn the opacity way down on the painting layer that I'm painting right now. Soften up some of these edges and then just leave the paint strokes that I want, and then I could always go back in and put some more in. This dark corner, we're painting around that object we're going to take out with freehand here shortly. And then now I'm just going back in and putting in the handrail. Right here is where I took out some of the handrail that I just broke away from the photo and chose to make the handrail more parallel ends and edges than it was. Now the joints on their own layer, that way I could change them if I need to. And that's it. Okay, that is the end of the speed painting. And just to recap quickly, I went ahead and copied over 3 of those layers, the 3 that I merged. Then that way, if you ever want your to give yourself an opportunity to go back and just clean things up, or just rearrange things at a later time, it'll give yourself an option to start previously in the painting. Again, that is just if you're in the phase of learning to paint also. The best is to try and give yourself as many options as you can. That way you again go back. But now, since I went ahead and put the mortar joints, which is right here, on their own layer, we decided we are going to go down and finish this by hand. But then what I'll be able to do is go back in and finish this with just our own colors, and that will be back down here. The stone handrail layer is actually the back wall layer, the original back wall layer. So if I turn it off, that would be it. And then what I will actually do is just finish this up and paint on it. But what we could do is we'll turn off the influence layer, and that's all you have to do. But now you could still trace as long as you could see what you're tracing, whether you turn down the opacities of some of the layers, or whether you could still see what would be considered your lamp guide, just your guide layer, and then you could still trace, but then you would just be on your own when it comes to picking colors. Now that's what I did very early in the cardinal painting. When I made the cardinal painting with freehand, I started very early with freehand. If you go back and review that particular section, what I did was I turned off the influence layers early, but then I also already had a base scumble coat down of colors, and that was it. I could not see the actual guide anymore. I was actually working off of the same picture on a different monitor. So just to answer some questions that were out there previously, as long as you have your influence layer off, you are on your own picking out your own colors. But then you may also be on your own with freehand too if you're already this opaque paint and you have to start painting on your own. Now we are just going to cover this over. So being that we turn off the influence layer, we will probably use these 4 colors right here. This one, this one, this one, and this one. And then keep in mind, all of these colors in here, you can actually go back in and just pick up the eyedropper and start picking some of these colors out of here if you want to use those same colors also. But I'm just going to go back in and just manually pick the colors, and we're just going to scumble over that and blend this in, and that will be it. Let's do that right now. And I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger. And what we'll do is, now we already turned our influence layer off, so we are on our own. We will actually be using this color right here if we do, but I'm going to go down and pick this color, and then we'll start just down here, and then we could cross-hatch them and mix them together, so that's no big deal. And then once we start blending, but now again, I'm using my own colors, so I can actually go back in and change the colors around if I want to. And then now that I have the mortar joints above this layer I'm working on, I don't have to worry about painting. I'll be painting in underneath them, so they will stay right where they're at. And we're going to go back to this color and get a little bit more darker color and just mix it in, and then that's it. And I will go right back to the blender. We're going to make it bigger. And I'm going to just soften these edges up a little bit. And again, I'll be working right underneath those mortar joints. We don't have to worry about those. And then obviously keep in mind, once everything's done, you can merge all the layers together and then blend in even more of your colors, or paint more of your colors, whatever you want to do, when everything is all on the same layer. And that would be it there. That would be considered done. If I fit it on a screen, I do like it better without that little corner. This entire painting would probably be almost considered a chiaroscuro painting with really bright lights and real dark darks with the black lamp. And again, that's what we talked about at the beginning, where the black lamp is going to really jump out at you up against that light background. And then the same thing with this right here. as far as this front wall, being it's in the light also. And then the way the light is splashing on these back walls, it really makes some nice cuts of different places. And then even the handrail, I often use the term of lost and founds. And what I mean by that is lost is a place like down in here where this handrail starts to blend in with the background and you completely lose it. But then the founds are like where this real dark handrail is up against a very light background. It'll tend to jump out at you, and that will give a 3D effect. But then the lost tend to create a three-dimensional movement and starts tying the pieces of the painting together. But again, we could go back over and do some different things and put some little gobs of paint here and there. But again, that would be your artistic license to take it wherever you want to from here. But we did this little wee bit freehand, and that's all we were going to do on this one, was just a little wee bit. And that way we just reviewed how to turn off the influence layer, and this painting would be considered done. But first, let's take a look at even just the base of this picture, the painting itself as far as the front wall goes. And what I wanted to show you is just how loose it really is. It tightens up a little bit when you fit it on screen, but it is just really hunks of color of paint here and there that make up the painting itself. But what I wanted to show you more importantly was, like, just say for example this highlight right here on the lamp, and then some of the streaks of the patina fading and dripping down onto the stone. The reason why is because I was very selective when I was blending. I just wasn't randomly blending. I wanted to blend in certain areas for certain reasons, and that is to leave certain hunks of paint here and there, such as this highlight, or some of the hard blues or purples on the railing to give it that iron steel forged look. Even the same thing over here, there's a little bit right here of a bluish purple. And then also, again, just the different colors that make up all of the actual patina draining down off of the copper. But again, like I said, it's just to show you that it's really just hunks of color that once I fit it back on screen, it tightens up a little bit more, and it doesn't have that individual paint stroke look to it. But with that said, this painting is finished now. We'll go on to a new picture and discuss some advanced techniques that we could do with the tracing layer. Okay, we opened up a new photo here, and this is just a close-up of a water lily. Plenty of color, plenty of contrast in the bright sunlight of midday. Something we could use to our advantage for a couple of different options here. Let's take a look at them now. The first one we will use is actually use the masking layer along with the tracing layer. But first, what I have to do is get a little bit of this flower done, and it will be on its own layer. But what I will do is, again, the same thing. I will go up here and assign the tracing layer to the tracing layer right there. And then now that one's locked, and I could turn it off. And then I already made my water lily guide about 40%. It just made it a little bit lighter than the last time. But again, you can make it as any adjustment you want depending on what the photograph is, more importantly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just get some of this flower done through speed painting, and then we'll see how we could use a few more options to help us get a painting done several different ways. So let's move into the speed painting. Okay, again, I'm just following the shapes of the petals, painting the back ones first, and then overlapping the closer petals just with the brush strokes. And I will just lay in the colors for now, and then go back in and blend the brush strokes a little bit. The only difference is this time I'm using a blending brush that actually has more of a brush stroke streaky pattern versus just the soft brush I used the last time in the lamp post. Now we'll just move in and see what we could do with the turquoise layer. Okay, we got enough of the speed painting done. What I wanted to do is just get the outer perimeter done, and just to give us something to work with. But right now what I wanted to do was, if I wanted to make this a masking layer, That'll give us a couple of options if we do that. But first we need to see just how well we painted it in, and just to see if there's actually any painting missing, paint itself. And there's a very basic way we could check that. And what we'll do is just go down to this layer, and since it'll create a layer above that one, a new layer, we're going to call this one Cobalt Turquoise. Now, the reason for that is what I need is a color that doesn't have anything to do with the painting at all. So what I will do is I'll stay on this layer, I'll go up and get my fill bucket, go down and grab my Cobalt Turquoise right here, and then just fill the background. But now you could see that there is some areas where I missed as far as where there's no paint at all. So whether you use a masking layer or if you even use the transparent lock, that would make a difference. If you use a masking layer, then color would be able to get into those areas and contaminate that part of the flower, wherever you see cobalt turquoise. With a transparent lock, you might start painting back over the flower, but you wouldn't be able to paint these areas that are cobalt turquoise because they're not already covered with paint. So for that reason, we'll go back over and I'll just get all of those areas out here just in the speed part. And what I will do is leave the cobalt turquoise there and then go back over and either repaint or reblend those areas just so we don't have any cobalt turquoise showing in the flower that we have done so far. So let's go ahead and take care of that. Okay, this would be the best time to note that as long as my tracing layer is the original photograph, that is where all the colors are coming from. So then I could slowly work over and cover all the turquoise color. Okay, now that I went back in and just filled in the gaps on the flower of what I had done, it would be a pretty clean layer to use for a transparent lock or a masking layer. I'll go back up and close these out. We're not using those at all right now. But what I can do is I will turn this off. And now here's our flower. So keep in mind, if I make this a masking layer now, again, I could either go up here and just hit M, or go up here to the layer drop down and then either just click on masking fluid layer, or Alt-Shift-M for the PC users and Option-Shift-M for the Mac users. Since I'm already here, I'll just click on that and make it a masking layer. Then now it will be locked. And now the only thing to consider is when this is a masking layer, you could use a masking layer for whatever reasons you need to with the tracing layer, but then they share the influence layers. And what I mean by that is if I click off of the influence layer, then this layer will not pertain to the mask anymore. I would be able to paint right over my masked area because it's not influenced anymore. But I would also be on my own with my own colors because now it's not an influence layer for a tracing layer either. So that's just something to consider, that as long as you have your influence layers, it will be a tracing layer and a masking layer in use also. So if this is your mask layer, then this is the layer that will be protected, which is the flower that I have painted so far. Now with that said, if I say, for example, go up to the green pads and then actually want to paint something, I can actually go back in here. I will grab a brush, make it a little wee bit bigger, and I will zoom in a little bit. And then if I start grabbing some of these greens from the pads and pull them in, that will be a protected layer. Now keep in mind, this green pad is above the flower, so it should be painting on top of the flower, but since it's actually a mask layer, it will actually be protected. Now the only difference is you could see what I'm doing here to a certain extent, that I'm pulling all my colors and going back into the flower, because if I do that up here in the water, it will still work. But keep in mind, if I start from the flower and go out, I'll still be able to pull colors out of the flower and then into my other area as far as whatever area I'm working, but it will still protect the flower area. I won't be able to paint on the flower except for the areas that are not protected or previously painted. So I can't paint anything on here. It's not going to paint since it is a protected mask area, but I will still be able to pull colors out of that area. So for that reason, I would have to actually keep pulling colors into that area. But this is just another option that if you wanted to use the masking layer along with the tracing layer, for whatever reason, you would need it to be masked. Any area that you're painting would be masked. You could use the masking layer along with that. Now, if I go back up here, and then I can even erase this out, since it's a protected area, I'll just get rid of that paint, and that's it. I could start all over again with that cleaned out area. But what I can also do then is just keep in mind, say for example, you even wanted to keep this flower the way it was and keep it as a masked layer, then you could even import another photograph and put it in over the water lily guide layer here I have. You could then put another layer above this one and then work from that photo and pull colors from it, providing that you make it the tracing layer. So as long as you pull the colors from your tracing layer, then that could even be a different photo. Because here's a spoiler alert for the next set of options. You can create any layer, the tracing layer, as many times as you want back and forth. So that can also help you as far as if you want to change things up and not necessarily just have to use one photo. Okay, we could use more than one photo if you want to get creative, but we could also use the same photo. And what I mean by that is I'm going to go down. First, I'm going to open this group up, and I'm going to resalvage the flower layer of what we already have painted, and I'm going to take it off the masking layer so I could slide it up here above the green pads in this group, and then I will turn these on. And this is going to be the group we're going to be working with now, and we're done with this group, so I'll close it down and turn it off. But now that we have this layer up here, this is the same photo we were working from, but what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to duplicate it over, and then now here's a duplicate of the exact same layer, but what we're going to do is go up into filter and then hit desaturate, and we're going to make a black and white version out of the exact same photo. And then that looks pretty good right there. I don't want to lose that bright sunny day look of mid-afternoon in the black and white values. So I will actually apply that. Now we have a black and white version and a color version. Now we know that we don't need to have either one of these on if we use them as tracing layers. But what we could actually do is make either one of those the tracing layer at any time. In photography, a lot of photographers like to work with black and white and color in the same photo. They'll either make an object in color or black and white, and then the rest of the photo just the exact opposite. So if we have a full color flower, and then we can actually make the rest of the background in black and white. Now again, that could be done in any photograph with any subject. So now if we go up to the tracing layer here, but in the black and white version, we know how to make it the tracing layer. So we just click on the T, and now I would be pulling my colors out of the black and white version. So if I go down to the green pads layer, and just say, for example, I go up here and grab a brush, I'll make it a little wee bit bigger. And then if I start working in, the water is the darkest part of that color. Here's the black and white version. Now these are the colors we would be pulling out of, and then obviously we would still have a full color flower. So if I turn that off, and if I start grabbing the blacks of the water, it's the darkest part of the flower, and I could start painting this all in and make the entire background black and white, or any parts of it. And the reason why, again, is I could take the actual layers and make them the tracing layer anytime I want, as many times as I want. So if I want to go back into the color layer and make it the tracing layer again, now all I got to do is make it a T, and then that's it. It's now the tracing layer. And if I go back to any influence layer or a new layer that I create and assign an influence layer to it, then that's the colors I would be pulling out of the full color. If I go back up to the black and white version and take it back to the tracing layer and make it the tracing layer, now again, I will actually go back to the green pads, and then I will actually be pulling my colors or values out of the black and white version, meaning that I can actually then create parts of the photo in full color and other parts of the photo in black and white. I go to my blender, and I will actually go back to the one I was using previously, make it a little bit bigger, and I could soften this up and then just bring that down, and I would be getting rid of any brush strokes that I have. But again, this is another option that if you want to combine your photograph and combine it with a black and white version and then paint both of them, then you can actually then have, go back up to the brush and go back to these lily pads here, and I would only be painting them in the black and white version. And the key thing to remember here is we can assign one layer, the tracing layer, as many times as we want to as many different layers as we want. But then obviously we can only have one tracing layer at a time, but the amount of times we do it is up to us. And then we can actually just color this in. And I'm trying to lift up and put down as many times as I can. Then if I go straight into my blender, I have my toggles again set. The front toggle is a color picker, and the back toggle goes right to my blender. So when I do paint freehand, that is pretty quick for me as to how I can change my colors and then also start blending. But here again, we could do the tracing layer, assign it to one layer as many times as we want. Now, keep in mind, that can even open up one last set of options, and that would be for those who paint in the grayscale method. Then you can actually just paint in your whole entire photograph in gray values, and then go back to your color layer and assign it the tracing layer, and then start going over lightly, change the opacity of your brush, and then going over lightly over the gray values with the color. And then you'd already have your shading already there if you choose to go that route and create a little bit more of a unique look versus just taking the colors completely from the photograph. Now, with that said, that is the end of this section, and hopefully it helped you in some way, shape, or form. And if you do get a chance to use a tracing layer system, hopefully this gave you some options just to help your creativity along, and hopefully this will help you. And until we see you out in the field or in the studio again next time, thanks for watching. Bye for now.